James had always been an ordinary person. Living in a small town on Earth, he enjoyed the little things: quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, walks by the lake, and weekends spent with friends. There was nothing about his life that stood out. But one day, everything changed. It started with an envelope. The thick, metallic paper shimmered in the sunlight as it lay on his doorstep. There was no return address, no name, just a strange symbol, an intricate, circular design that seemed to glow faintly. His curiosity got the best of him, and as the ship ascended into the stars, James looked out the window, feeling a strange sense of peace. Whatever was waiting for him on the Zorathi homeworld, he knew that this was just the beginning of something far greater than he could ever imagine. As the spacecraft soared deeper into the stars, James felt a sense of awe that he couldn't shake. The vastness of space was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The ship hummed with a quiet, almost soothing sound as it sped through the cosmos. He looked out the window, trying to comprehend what was happening. In a matter of hours, his life had shifted from the mundane routine of his small town to the unknown depths of the galaxy. The High Priestess, who introduced herself simply as Ilara, stood beside him, watching the stars with a calm expression. Her presence was both calming and intimidating, like she carried the weight of centuries of knowledge and power. "You must be wondering what this all means," Ilara said, her voice soft but full of wisdom. "You are about to step into a world unlike anything you have known." James nodded, though his mind was still racing. "I'm trying to understand," he admitted. "Why me? I'm just a regular guy. What is this ritual? And why was I chosen?" Ilara turned her gaze to him, her glowing eyes full of understanding. "The ritual is not what you think. It is not a trial, nor a test of strength. It is a union of knowledge, a merging of cultures. Your species, humanity, has something that we, the Zorathi, have lost." James looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? What have you lost?" "Hope," she said simply. "We, the Zorathi, were once a species filled with creativity and innovation. Our minds were sharp, and our hearts were full of compassion. But over time, we stagnated. We became focused on maintaining our way of life instead of evolving." James was quiet, absorbing her words. He had heard of other alien species in science fiction, but he never imagined meeting one. The Zorathi sounded different, sophisticated and ancient, but also struggling in some way. "And you think humans can help?" James asked, still trying to wrap his head around it. Ilara gave a small smile. "Yes, you have something we do not. Your species possesses an unyielding spirit, a drive to keep moving forward, to push boundaries. Your creativity is fueled by emotion and the desire to explore. It is that very quality that we hope to rekindle within ourselves." James felt a spark of pride, though he still wasn't entirely sure what all of this meant. He was just an ordinary guy. How could his creativity or spirit possibly help an entire alien civilization? He tried to shake the doubts, but the weight of the situation felt heavy on his shoulders. Before he could speak again, the ship suddenly shifted direction, pulling James from his thoughts. They were approaching a planet, a massive world that appeared to be a mixture of rocky terrain and vast oceans, surrounded by swirling clouds of blue and green. "This is Zorathar," Ilara said, her voice filled with reverence. "Our home. Welcome." James looked out the window, his breath catching in his throat. The planet was breathtaking. Towering mountains pierced the sky, and the seas shimmered with an eerie glow. The landscape looked both alien and familiar, as if it had elements of Earth, but on a grander scale. Large cities, crafted from shimmering stone, could be seen in the distance, rising like jewels from the surface. The ship descended smoothly, and soon they landed on a platform at the edge of a grand city. As James stepped out of the ship, he was greeted by an entire procession of Zorathi. They were tall beings, their skin shimmering with various shades of blue and silver, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. There was an elegance in their movements, as if they were all perfectly in tune with each other and the world around them. Elara led him through the crowd, her presence parting the way like a gentle tide. James felt a mixture of awe and nervousness as he walked, taking in the sights and sounds of the Zorathi city. The buildings were unlike anything he had ever seen, curved, organic shapes that seemed to grow out of the land itself. The air smelled fresh, with a subtle sweetness that reminded him of the flowers back home. They reached a grand hall, where the High Priestess ushered James inside. The room was vast, with ceilings that stretched upward far beyond his sight. It was filled with ancient artifacts, holographic displays, and intricate symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. "This is the heart of our civilization," Elara explained. "Here, we preserve the knowledge of our people, but it has grown quiet over the centuries. Our minds no longer seek to grow, to create. We have forgotten how to dream." James looked around, feeling the weight of her words. He could see the beauty and the history in the room, but there was something missing, something that could not be touched, only felt. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Elara turned to him, her eyes glowing brightly. "Now you will see what makes humans unique. You will help us rediscover the spark we have lost. This is the ritual, to share with us what makes you human, to open our minds and hearts to new possibilities." James didn't fully understand what the ritual entailed, but he could sense the sincerity in Elara's words. She believed in him. She believed the humans had something special, and for the first time, he felt like he might be part of something much bigger than himself. The journey had only just begun, and James knew that whatever happened next, he would never be the same. The days on Zorathar passed like a dream for James. Every morning, he would wake up in the serene guest chamber provided to him by the High Priestess. The room was unlike anything he had ever seen, a blend of natural elements and advanced technology. The walls seemed alive, shifting their colors to reflect the soft glow of the alien sun, and the air carried a calming fragrance that reminded him of Earth's forests after rain. But despite the breathtaking beauty of Zorathar, James felt a growing unease. The idea of being chosen for the ritual weighed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was completely unprepared. Why him, of all people? What if he failed? He hadn't been given much time to process everything before he was swept into a series of introductions and ceremonies. The Zorathi welcomed him with warmth, their glowing eyes filled with hope and curiosity. Yet, James couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Their language, their customs, their way of moving and thinking, it was all so different. They were kind, yes, but there was an air of expectation that made him feel small. One morning, Elara summoned James to the Grand Council chamber, a vast circular room with walls that pulsed faintly, as if alive. The chamber was filled with Zorathi elders, their presence dignified and commanding. James could feel their gaze on him as he entered, and his heart pounded in his chest. "James," Elara began, her voice steady and calm. "The council wishes to understand you better. They have questions about your world, your people, and what makes humanity unique." James nodded nervously, unsure of what to say. He wasn't a diplomat or a scientist. He was just a regular guy from a small town. What could he possibly offer to these advanced beings? The first elder, a towering figure with deep silver skin, leaned forward. "Human," he began, his tone both curious and cautious. "Your species is known for its resilience and creativity. Tell us what drives humans to push beyond their limits, to achieve what seems impossible." James hesitated, struggling to find the right words. I think it's because we're always searching for something," he said finally. "Whether it's understanding, connection, or just the need to survive, we're always looking for a way forward. Even when things seem impossible, there's this belief that we can figure it out. That's what keeps us going." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Another elder spoke, her voice softer but no less intense. And what of your emotions? It is said that humans are deeply driven by feelings, by love, by fear, by hope. How do these emotions shape your decisions? James thought for a moment. Emotions are complicated, he admitted. They can push us to do amazing things, but they can also hold us back. I think the key is learning how to balance them, how to let our emotions inspire us without letting them control us. The room fell silent, and James felt a pang of doubt. Were his answers good enough? Did they make sense to beings who lived such different lives? He couldn't tell. But then, Ilara stepped forward, her gaze steady and reassuring. Your words carry wisdom, James, she said. The strength of humanity lies in its ability to adapt and grow. This is why you were chosen, for your heart as much as your mind. James felt a flicker of hope at her words, but the weight of responsibility still loomed over him. The Zorathi were placing their faith in him, and he wasn't sure he deserved it. That evening, as he sat in his chamber, staring out at the alien skyline, he found himself lost in thought. Could he really help the Zorathi rediscover what they had lost? What if he failed and let them down? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Ilara. She entered quietly, her presence filling the room with a calming energy. You seem troubled, she said gently. James sighed. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I don't even know what I'm doing here. What if I can't help you? Ilara smiled, her glowing eyes warm. Doubt is natural, James. But remember, we did not choose you for what you know. We chose you for who you are. You have something within you that cannot be measured, something that gives us hope. Trust in that, and you will find your way. Her words lingered in James's mind long after she left. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't have to have all the answers. Maybe it was enough to simply try, to bring his humanity to the table, and see where it led. As the alien moons rose in the sky, bathing the city in soft light, James made a decision. He would give this his all, not because he felt ready, but because he believed in what this could mean for the Zorathi, for humanity, and for the future. He didn't know what the ritual would demand of him, but he was determined to find out. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, James felt a glimmer of confidence. Whatever came next, he would face it with an open heart. The following days passed quickly as James continued to adjust to life on Zorathar. Each day brought new discoveries and challenges. The Zorathi were patient with him, answering his questions and teaching him their ways. But no matter how much he learned, there was always a feeling that something bigger was at play, something he couldn't fully understand yet. Ilara had invited him to witness the ancient Zorathi ceremony of unity, an event that occurred once every few cycles. The Zorathi explained that the ceremony was an important tradition where individuals would come together to renew their shared bonds and reinforce their commitment to their people's future. It was a deeply symbolic event, and James had been honored with an invitation to participate. As he entered the grand hall where the ceremony would take place, James was struck by the beauty of the space. The room was enormous, its walls carved from shimmering crystal that seemed to hum with energy. There were large, floating platforms hovering above the ground, on which Zorathi elders and leaders stood in quiet meditation. The atmosphere was calm, almost reverential. Ilara led James to a seat near the center of the room, where the most important part of the ceremony would occur. She had told him that the ritual wasn't something that could be explained in words alone. He would need to experience it to truly understand. This ceremony represents everything we have lost and everything we hope to gain, Ilara had told him earlier. It is a way to reconnect with the essence of what it means to be Zorathi. But this time, it will be different. This time, you will join us. James sat quietly, trying to absorb everything around him. The other Zorathi in the room were silent, their eyes closed in deep concentration. The air was thick with anticipation, and James could feel the energy in the room swirling like a living thing. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the room filled with a soft, melodic hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't music, but something more ancient, a sound that resonated deep within James's bones. He felt it stir something inside of him, something primal and deeply human. Ilara stepped forward, raising her arms in a graceful motion. The crowd fell silent, and a series of soft lights illuminated the center of the room. There, an intricate symbol appeared, floating in the air, a combination of swirling lines and glowing shapes. It looked almost like a map of the stars, but there was something alive about it, as if the symbol itself was breathing. The Zorathi have always believed that to connect with the universe, we must first connect with ourselves. Ilara's voice rang out, clear and powerful. Tonight, we will begin the process of renewal. And James, you will be a part of this rebirth. James felt his heart race as he stood and moved to the center of the room, where the symbol hovered. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt a deep pull toward it, as if the universe itself was guiding him forward. Ilara's eyes met his. "Place your hands on the symbol," she instructed. Without thinking, James obeyed. As his palms touched the glowing lines, a wave of energy surged through him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. He felt his body tingle, and his mind seemed to expand. Images flashed before his eyes. Visions of distant stars, alien landscapes, and the faces of beings he didn't recognize. The energy was so intense that it made him dizzy, but he couldn't pull his hands away. "Focus," Ilara's voice whispered in his ear. "Feel the connection. Let your humanity flow into the ritual." For a moment, James felt nothing but the rush of energy. Then, slowly, he began to understand. This wasn't just about power or knowledge. It was about unity, about the bond between himself and the Zorathi, between humanity and the stars. It was about hope, the kind that had driven humans to explore the unknown, to reach for things that were far beyond their grasp. James could feel that hope now, pulsing through him like a heartbeat. It was the very essence of what it meant to be human, to dream, to strive, and to never give up. The Zorathi had lost that spark, but it was something James could share with them. He closed his eyes, letting the energy flow through him, feeling it connect him to the Zorathi and their world. In that moment, he realized that he wasn't just a spectator in this ritual. He was part of it, an essential piece of the puzzle. When he opened his eyes, the symbol before him had shifted. The lines had changed, forming new patterns that were more intricate, more complex. The energy in the room had changed too. It was lighter now, less tense, as if the ritual had begun to shift the very atmosphere of Zorathar. Ilara stepped forward, her face glowing with pride. "You have done it, James," she said softly. "You have opened the door to something new. The Zorathi will never be the same." James looked around, seeing the expressions of the other Zorathi in the room. They were no longer just distant, ancient beings. They were alive with possibility, with the same hope that had once driven humanity to explore the stars. And for the first time, James felt like he truly belonged. As the ceremony continued, James knew that this was only the beginning. He had shared something with the Zorathi, something human, something powerful, and together they would build a new future. He didn't know exactly where it would lead, but he was ready to face whatever came next. In the days following the ceremony, James felt a deep sense of change. The Zorathi had always been a peaceful and thoughtful people, but now there was a new energy among them, a spark that had not been there before. It was as if something had been unlocked within them, something dormant for centuries, waiting to be awakened. James spent his days with Ilara, learning more about Zorathar and its people. She guided him through the planet's vast cities, showing him the wonders of Zorathi technology and culture. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, clean, elegant structures that seemed to grow naturally from the planet itself, powered by energy sources that defied human understanding. The Zorathi had mastered their world in ways that humans could only dream of, but there was still a feeling of stagnation, a sense that they had lost their drive to push beyond what was familiar. Ilara had explained that the ritual he had participated in was just the beginning. It was a way to reconnect the Zorathi with the energy of the universe and rekindle their lost sense of purpose. But there was more to it. James had felt that first surge of connection, that first brush with the power of unity. Now it was time to deepen that bond. "James," Ilara said one afternoon, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the great city of Zorathar, "you have done something incredible. You have brought hope to our people." James looked at her, his mind still racing with questions. "But what happens next? What else can I do?" Ilara smiled, her eyes full of understanding. "What you have done is only a small part of the journey. Now you must show us how humanity dreams. You must teach us what it means to reach for the stars, not just in technology, but in spirit." James was quiet for a moment, trying to understand. "You want me to show you how to dream?" Ilara nodded. "Yes. You must help us remember what it means to hope for the impossible, to see beyond what is in front of us and imagine a future we cannot yet touch." James thought about her words. It was both daunting and inspiring. Could he really help the Zorathi rediscover the kind of creativity and innovation that had driven humanity forward? How could he possibly show them something so intangible as hope? Later that evening, as they gathered in a large council chamber, the Zorathi leaders and elders assembled to discuss the next steps. James sat quietly among them, still unsure of his place in all of this. The room was filled with soft, glowing lights that flickered like stars, and the air was filled with the hum of energy, a quiet current that seemed to resonate through the very walls. Ilara addressed the assembly, her voice filled with authority. "We have reached a crossroads. We have felt the stirrings of change, but we do not yet know where it will lead. James has shown us a new path, but we must now walk it together." One of the elders, a wise and respected figure named Loria, spoke up. "We have always relied on logic and reason. We have focused on what can be measured and understood. But perhaps it is time for something different. Perhaps it is time to embrace what cannot be quantified, the unknown." The room was silent for a moment as the Zorathi elders exchanged glances. James could feel the weight of their decision. This was not just about technology or knowledge. This was about a shift in their very way of thinking. They were being asked to embrace something new, something they had not known in centuries. Ilara turned to James. "What do you think, James?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with expectation. James felt the pressure of their gaze upon him. What could he say? How could he inspire a people who had seen so much, who had already mastered so much, to look beyond what they knew and dream again? For a moment, he was quiet, searching for the right words. Then he remembered something, a memory from his own childhood, when he had stared up at the stars and wondered what was out there, beyond the reach of human knowledge. It had been that curiosity, that unquenchable desire to explore, that had driven humanity to create, to innovate, to dream. "I think," James began, his voice steady but filled with conviction, "that the key is to never stop asking questions, to never stop imagining. Human beings don't just build things because they need them. We build them because we see something in the world that others can't, something that hasn't been realized yet. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to ask the questions that don't have answers. It's about believing that there's always more to discover, more to create." He paused, looking around the room. The Zorathi were listening intently, their eyes filled with curiosity. For the first time, James felt like he was speaking to them, not as an outsider, but as someone who shared something deep and human with them. "What I've learned in my own life," James continued, "is that you can't wait for the world to tell you what's possible. You have to imagine it yourself. You have to believe in the impossible, even when no one else does." There was a long silence after he spoke, and then slowly, the room began to hum with energy. The Zorathi leaders exchanged thoughtful glances, and for the first time in centuries, there was a spark of excitement in their eyes. Ilara stepped forward, her face glowing with a new sense of purpose. James, you have shown us the way. We will take this lesson to heart. Together, we will explore new possibilities. We will look beyond what we know and dare to imagine what could be. As James stood there, surrounded by the Zorathi, he felt a deep sense of connection to them. He had come to Zorathar, not knowing what to expect, but now he knew that they were ready to embrace the future, and he would be there to help them every step of the way. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, James felt like he wasn't just a visitor. He was part of something much bigger. A new chapter in the story of Zorathar and humanity, a story that was only just beginning. As the weeks passed, James found himself becoming more immersed in Zorathi culture. The initial uncertainty he had felt began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was an important part of the Zorathi's journey toward renewal. The bond between him and Elura had deepened, and he found himself learning from her in ways he never expected. The Zorathi had begun to embrace his teachings in small but significant ways. They no longer relied solely on their advanced technology to solve problems. Instead, they started exploring new methods of creativity, combining their logic with a sense of imagination they hadn't known in centuries. They began to dream again, just as James had encouraged them to do. But with this new approach came new challenges. The Zorathi were not used to thinking this way, and some of the elders struggled with the change. They were unsure of what the future would hold if they let go of the old ways and embraced the unknown. It wasn't easy for them to take risks, to open themselves up to ideas that couldn't be immediately measured or tested. One day, as James and Elura walked through the city, he sensed a shift in the air. There was an unfamiliar tension in the atmosphere, as if something was about to happen. The Zorathi had gathered in the central square, and James could see that their faces were filled with concern. Elura's expression was serious as she turned to him. "James," she said softly, "there are those who resist change. Some of the elders fear that we are moving too quickly, that we are abandoning the wisdom of our ancestors." James nodded, understanding the weight of the situation. "I get it. Change is hard, especially for a people as old and wise as the Zorathi. But sometimes you have to take that leap of faith." Elura looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with both trust and doubt. "I believe in what you've shown us, but convincing everyone else will be a challenge. They have lived their entire lives according to the old ways. To ask them to embrace something new is not something they take lightly." They arrived at the center of the square, where a large gathering of Zorathi had assembled. The elders were gathered on a raised platform, their expressions unreadable. A tall elder named Talon stepped forward, his silver skin gleaming in the sunlight. His voice was calm but firm as he addressed the crowd. "We stand at a crossroads," he said. "James has shown us new possibilities, but we must consider carefully whether we are ready to abandon our traditions. Our technology has served us well for generations. What if this new path leads us astray?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, and James could sense the unease in the air. He knew this was a critical moment. This was the turning point. If the Zorathi could not find the courage to move forward, their hopes for the future might crumble. Elura stepped forward, her voice calm and authoritative. "Talon, I understand your concerns. We have all relied on our traditions for so long, but we are not abandoning them. We are simply adding something new. James has shown us that there is more to life than what we can see and measure. He has reminded us that we are more than our technology. We are beings of creativity, of hope, of dreams." She turned to the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the Zorathi gathered in the square. "We cannot ignore what James has taught us. We cannot stay in the past forever. We must dare to dream again, to take risks. That is the only way forward." There was a long pause as the crowd fell silent. James could feel the tension building, and for a moment, he feared they would reject Elura's words. But then, slowly, something changed. One by one, the Zorathi began to nod, their eyes softening with understanding. It was as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Talon stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "You speak of dreams, Elara, but we have not dreamed in a long time. What if those dreams lead us into darkness?" Elara smiled, her voice gentle yet firm. "Then we will face the darkness together, as one. But we will never know what we are capable of if we do not try. We have the strength to face whatever comes." For a moment, there was silence again. And then, one by one, the elders stepped forward. Talon, who had once resisted the change, was the first to place his hand on the glowing crystal in the center of the square, symbolizing his willingness to embrace the unknown. Slowly, the other elders followed suit, each one placing their hand on the crystal, signaling their acceptance of the new path. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. This was it. This was the moment when the Zorathi truly began to believe in the future again. Elara turned to James, her face glowing with pride. "You have done it, James. You have helped us remember what it means to dream. We are no longer bound by the past." James smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. It had not been easy, but he had helped them take that first step toward a new future. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, James felt confident that the Zorathi were ready to face whatever came next. As the sun set over Zorathar, casting the city in a warm golden light, James looked up at the stars. He knew that humanity and the Zorathi were on a path of discovery, and together they would find new ways to reach for the impossible. The journey was far from over. But now, there was hope, and hope was all they needed. The months that followed the ceremony marked the beginning of a new era for Zorathar. The Zorathi were no longer the same people they had been before. They had rediscovered the power of imagination, creativity, and hope, the very things that had once defined humanity. But now, those same qualities had found a place among the Zorathi, breathing new life into their civilization. James stood with Elara on a high balcony overlooking the city, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The streets were bustling with activity as Zorathi citizens and humans alike worked side by side, building new technologies and sharing ideas. The changes had come quickly, but they had been embraced with enthusiasm and excitement. The city was alive with possibility, and James could feel it in the air. "It's amazing to see how far we've come," James said, his voice filled with awe as he looked at the thriving metropolis below. Elara smiled beside him, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You have helped us remember what it means to be more than just a species of knowledge and logic. You've shown us that we are more than just our past. We are what we choose to be in the future." James glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "It's not just me, Elara. It's all of you. You've embraced this change together. I just helped point the way." Elara nodded, her expression serious but full of determination. "We have learned that the future is not something that can be predicted or controlled. It is something we must create with our hands, with our hearts, and with our dreams." As they stood there, the sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. A group of Zorathi leaders approached, including Talon, the elder who had once resisted change. His silver skin shimmered in the fading light, and his expression was one of quiet contemplation. "James," Talon said, his voice calm and measured, "I wanted to thank you. Your words and actions have brought about a transformation that none of us could have imagined." James smiled, but there was a humbleness in his tone. "I didn't do it alone, Talon. The Zorathi made this happen. You all made it happen." Talon looked out over the city with a deep, reflective gaze. "Perhaps it was always within us, waiting to be awakened. But your presence has been the spark that set it all in motion. And for that, we are grateful." Elara placed a hand on James's shoulder, her voice soft but full of emotion. "We have learned that true progress doesn't come from simply advancing technology or accumulating knowledge. It comes from the willingness to dream, to take risks, and to move forward even when the way is uncertain." James nodded, understanding the depth of her words. The Zorathi had built an empire based on logic and precision, But now they were learning to balance that with the unpredictable, often messy nature of creativity. It was a difficult balance, but they were making it work. As the days turned into weeks and then months, the collaboration between humanity and the Zorathi deepened. New inventions began to emerge, machines that combined the best of human innovation with the Zorathi's advanced understanding of energy. New ideas were shared freely, and the exchange of knowledge was no longer a one-sided affair. Both species were growing together, learning from each other in ways neither could have imagined before. James had become an integral part of the Zorathi society. His ideas about creativity, exploration, and discovery had inspired entire generations. He found himself teaching, not just about human culture, but about the importance of risk-taking, of embracing the unknown. One day, as James stood in the middle of a bustling workshop, watching humans and Zorathi work side by side, he felt a deep sense of pride. The future that had once seemed so uncertain was now unfolding before his eyes. The Zorathi had embraced their potential, and humanity had given them the courage to do so. Elura appeared at his side, her face alight with excitement. "James, I have something to show you." She led him down a hallway and into a vast chamber that was still under construction. It was filled with strange new machines and glowing structures that seemed to pulse with energy. "What is this?" James asked, his curiosity piqued. Elura grinned. "It's a new project we've been working on, one that combines your knowledge of human exploration with our technology. We're calling it the Elysium Project." James raised an eyebrow. "Elysium Project?" "Yes, it's a new spacecraft capable of traveling far beyond the limits of Zorathar. We want to reach the stars together, humanity and Zorathi side by side, discovering new worlds and sharing our knowledge with the universe." James's heart skipped a beat. This was the dream he had always believed in, the dream of exploration, of going beyond the stars, of uniting different civilizations in the name of discovery. "You're serious about this?" James asked, his voice filled with awe. "Completely," Elura replied, her eyes shining with determination. "We have the technology, and now we have the will. We will reach the stars, James, and we will do it together." As James looked around at the bustling workshop, the hum of excitement in the air, he knew that this was only the beginning. The Zorathi and humanity had created something incredible, something that had never existed before, a bond forged by creativity, dreams, and a shared hope for the future. James smiled, his heart filled with pride. "Together," he whispered, "there's nothing we can't achieve." And with that, the first steps toward a new era began, one where the Zorathi and humanity would explore the stars, side by side, united by their shared dreams and their unbreakable bond.